Morning I found the envelope, I was still in my bathrobe. It was a Tuesday in October, early enough that the neighbor's sprinklers were still running, and I remember thinking I needed to call someone about the leak under my kitchen sink. Normal thoughts, the kind you have when life is still ordinary. The envelope was tucked between a Bed Bath & Beyond circular and my electric bill. No return address, just my name, Lawrence Mercer, printed in block letters like whoever sent it didn't want me to recognize their handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a loan application. My signature was at the bottom. I had never seen that document before in my life. I sat down at the kitchen table and I stayed there for a long time. Long enough that the sprinklers shut off and the street went quiet. Long enough that my coffee went cold. I kept looking at that signature, my name, my loops, the little flourish I put on the capital L that my third-grade teacher taught me, and I thought, someone practiced this. Someone sat down and copied my handwriting until they got it right. That someone was my son. Let me tell you who I am before I tell you what happened, because this story only makes sense if you understand what I built and what I believed. My name is Lawrence Mercer. I'm 68 years old. I spent 31 years as a civil engineer for the county of Maricopa in Arizona. I designed drainage systems, flood control channels, infrastructure that most people drive over every day without thinking about it. I liked that. I liked the idea of building things that outlast you. My wife, Patricia, and I had 2 children. Our daughter Brenda lives in Portland and calls me every Sunday without fail. My son, I'll call him by his name because he's earned it. My son Marcus is 41 years old and lives in Scottsdale, about 20 minutes from my house. Patricia passed 6 years ago. Pancreatic cancer, 7 weeks from diagnosis to the end. It was the kind of loss that rearranges every room inside you. After she died, Marcus came around more. He brought his wife Courtney and their 2 kids, and they'd have dinner at my place on Sunday nights sometimes. I genuinely believed that grief had brought us closer, that losing his mother had softened something in him. I was a fool, but I was a loving fool. I think that matters. Patricia and I had done well over the years. We weren't wealthy in any flashy sense, but we had been careful and patient. The house in Chandler was paid off. We had retirement savings, roughly $420,000 in IRAs and a brokerage account. I had a pension from the county, and 2 years after Patricia died, I bought a townhouse in Tempe, a nice place, 2 bedrooms, about $310,000, and I put it in Marcus's name as a gift. He and Courtney had been renting, and I wanted to help. I wanted to do something that felt like the kind of thing Patricia would have done. I didn't ask for anything in return. I didn't draw up a promissory note. I didn't consult a lawyer. I just signed the deed and handed my son the keys and watched him hug me in the driveway. And I thought, this is what you do for your children. The first sign came about 8 months after I transferred the townhouse. Marcus called me on a Wednesday afternoon. He almost never called on weekdays, and said he and Courtney wanted to take me to dinner. Somewhere nice. I said sure, and picked out a clean shirt and drove to the restaurant they'd chosen, a steakhouse in Old Town Scottsdale that I knew from the menu prices was more expensive than anywhere Marcus usually suggested. Over dinner, he told me he'd been thinking about my situation. He used that word, situation, like my life was a problem to be managed. He said that with Mom gone, and with me getting older, it made sense to have someone he trusted looking after my finances. Just to make things simpler, he said. Just so I didn't have to worry. I told him I wasn't worried. He said that wasn't the point. The point was preparedness. He used the word preparedness 3 times. Courtney smiled at me across the table and put her hand on Marcus's arm like she was bracing him for a difficult conversation. I noticed she didn't touch her steak. Marcus slid a folder across the table. Inside was a durable power of attorney document already filled out. My name was on it. His name was on it. There was a line for my signature. I looked at that folder for a moment. Then I closed it and handed it back. I said, I'm 66 years old and I manage my own finances just fine. If that changes, I'll let you know. Marcus said I was being stubborn. Courtney said nothing, but she stopped smiling. We finished dinner mostly in silence, and I drove home alone and sat in Patricia's chair in the living room. I still thought of it as hers, and I tried to remember if I'd missed something. some sign that this was coming. I hadn't. Or if I had, I hadn't wanted to see it. After that dinner, things shifted in a way I couldn't quite name at first. Marcus called less. When he did call, the conversations were short and practical. Did I need anything? How was I feeling? Had I thought any more about what he'd mentioned? I always said I was fine. He always sounded slightly disappointed. Courtney stopped texting me pictures of the grandkids, which she used to do every few days. Small things. The kind of absence you feel before you can describe it. Then one Saturday in February, I drove to Tempe to drop off a tool I'd lent Marcus, a level nothing important, and I found Courtney's sister's car in the driveway. I didn't think anything of it. I knocked, Courtney opened the door, and over her shoulder I could see boxes in the living room, moving boxes. I asked if everything was okay. Courtney said they were just reorganizing. Her sister stood behind her and didn't say anything. I left the level on the porch and drove home. 2 weeks later I found out, not from Marcus, but from a county tax notice forwarded to my old address, that the Tempe townhouse had been refinanced. Someone had taken out a home equity line of credit against it. $95,000. The property was in Marcus's name. He had every legal right to do it. He had never mentioned it to me. I want to be careful here, because I know how this sounds. I know some of you are listening and thinking, he gave his son a house. The son refinanced it. That's not a crime. And legally, you'd be right. Marcus owned that property. He could do whatever he wanted with it. But that $95,000 didn't come out of nowhere. It came out of the equity I had put into that home. And he had never said a word to me about it. Not a word. I started paying closer attention after that. I pulled my credit report for the first time in probably 4 years. Everything looked normal. I checked my brokerage account online, which I usually did monthly. Normal. Checked my IRA. Normal. I started keeping a notebook. Dates, amounts, anything that seemed off. For 3 months, nothing. I almost convinced myself I was being paranoid. Then in May I came home from a doctor's appointment to find a voicemail from First Western Bank, asking me to call back regarding my home equity application. I didn't have a home equity application. I had paid off my house in Chandler in 2019, and I had no plans to borrow against it. I called the bank back. The loan officer was apologetic but careful. She said an application had been submitted 2 weeks prior with my name, my social security number, and my signature. She said the application had been flagged by their fraud department because the signature on the supporting documents didn't match the signature on file from my original mortgage from 22 years ago. The application had been denied, but only because someone in that fraud department had been paying attention. I thanked her. I hung up. I sat down on the floor of my kitchen. Not in a chair, on the floor, because my legs just stopped working. And I looked at the ceiling and I thought about my son practicing my signature. I thought about him sitting at a table somewhere with a piece of paper and a pen, getting the capital L right. I didn't call Marcus. I want to be clear about that. Every part of me wanted to pick up the phone and ask him what in God's name he was doing, but I had spent 31 years in a field where you don't make decisions when you're emotional. You gather information. You document. You understand the full scope of a problem before you start making changes. I called an attorney instead. Her name was Beverly Okafor, and a friend from my church had used her for an estate matter a few years back. I sat in her office and I told her everything. The POA dinner, the refinanced townhouse, the loan application with my forged signature, and I put the envelope on her desk. Beverly looked at the loan application for a long time. Then she looked at me. She said, "Mr. Mercer, what you're describing is called elder financial fraud. The forged signature alone is a felony. I want you to understand what your options are." I told her I was listening. She explained that I could file a police report with the Chandler PD. I could contact the Arizona Attorney General's Elder Abuse Unit. I could petition the court to undo the Tempe townhouse transfer on the grounds of undue influence, though that would be difficult given I'd transferred it willingly. What I could do immediately, right now, that day, was take steps to lock down every account and every asset before another application was submitted. I asked her what I should do first. She said, "First, you don't tell your son you were here." I spent the next 6 weeks doing what Beverly told me to do. I froze my credit at all 3 bureaus the same afternoon. I changed the account numbers on my checking and savings, which the bank helped me do without any trouble once I explained the situation. I updated the beneficiary designations on my IRA and my life insurance policy. Marcus had been listed as primary on both. Now he was listed on neither. I also rewrote my will. Beverly helped me set up a revocable living trust with Brenda as trustee. Everything went into that trust. The house, the investment accounts, everything. It meant that if anything happened to me, Marcus would have no legal claim to a single dollar of my estate. The house would eventually pass to both my children, but the trustee would be Brenda, and Brenda would manage the distribution. Brenda cried when I called to tell her. She said she'd had a feeling something was wrong but hadn't wanted to push. I told her she wasn't wrong. I also filed the police report. It wasn't easy, sitting across from a detective and saying my son forged my signature. There's no way to do that without feeling like something inside you is breaking. The detective was kind. He said they would investigate and that I shouldn't expect a quick resolution, but the record would exist. Through all of this, I didn't say a word to Marcus. He called twice during those 6 weeks. I answered both times. I said I was fine. I said I was fine. I said I'd been busy with yard work. I said I'd talk to him soon. Normal, ordinary. The kind of conversations we'd had for years. Then came the Sunday in June. I'd gotten used to Marcus and Courtney coming for dinner occasionally, maybe once a month, sometimes less. Patricia had started the tradition, and it had continued by habit more than anything else. That Sunday I had already decided I was done with the tradition. I just haven't said so yet. At 4:17 in the afternoon, my phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. I still have it. I'll read you exactly what it said. Hey Dad, just wanted to let you know Courtney's parents are in town this weekend, so we're doing a big family dinner here tonight. I know it's last minute. Hope you understand. That was it. No apology, no suggestion of another time. Just, hope you understand. I put the phone down on the kitchen counter. I looked out the window at the backyard, at the mesquite tree Patricia had planted the year we moved in. I thought about 31 years of building infrastructure. Things that outlast you. I picked the phone back up and I typed, "No problem. Have a good evening." Then I opened my banking app and I made a phone call to my financial advisor that I had been planning for 2 weeks. Marcus had asked me several months earlier if I would be willing to help with the property taxes on the Tempe townhouse. The refinancing had left them short 1 month, he said, and he just needed a bridge. I had been transferring $2,400 a month to a joint account we'd set up for that purpose. I had been doing this for 4 months. That afternoon, I closed the joint account. Then I called Beverly and told her we were ready to move forward with the formal notification letter. Marcus called me 3 days later. It was a Thursday morning and I was watering the tomatoes I'd planted along the back fence. He didn't say hello. He said, "Dad, what happened to the account?" I said, "Which account?" He said, "You know which account. The property tax account. There's nothing in it." I said, "I closed it." Silence, long enough that I thought the call had dropped. Then he said, "Dad, the property taxes are due in October. We need that money." I said, "Marcus, I know when property taxes are due in Maricopa County. I spent 30 years working for this county. And I need to tell you something," he said. "What?" I said, "I know about the loan application at First Western Bank." Another silence. Different from the first one. The first silence was confusion. This one was something else. I said, "I know about the forged signature. I know about the HELOC on the Tempe property. I know you've been talking to an attorney about guardianship options. I know all of it, Marcus. I've known for 2 months." He started to say something. I think he was going to say I was confused, I was remembering wrong, some version of Dad. "You're not thinking clearly." And I stopped him. I said, "I filed a police report in May. There's an open investigation with the Chandler Police Department. Beverly Okafor has copies of everything, and I've already changed the beneficiaries on my retirement accounts and my life insurance. I've moved everything into a trust with your sister as trustee." He didn't say anything. I said, "I want you to understand that I'm not angry. I'm tired. I'm tired. I'm heartbroken. And I miss your mother, and I think she would be devastated if she knew what you tried to do. But I'm not confused. I'm not diminished. and I am not going to let you take what I built." I heard him breathing. I said, "I hope you'll talk to a lawyer, Marcus. Not for my sake, for yours." Then I hung up and went back to my tomatoes. I won't tell you that what came next was easy. It wasn't. The investigation took months. Eventually, the detective called to tell me that the district attorney had reviewed the evidence and that Marcus was being charged with forgery and attempted financial fraud against a vulnerable adult. That's the legal category. Vulnerable adult. I'm still getting used to hearing myself described that way. Marcus hired a defense attorney. We don't speak. Brenda came out from Portland for 2 weeks in August, and we sat on the back patio most evenings and talked about things I hadn't talked about in years. Patricia, what she was like before the kids were born, the house we lived in before Chandler, the trip we took to the Smoky Mountains in 1994. We ate good food and watched the sun go down behind the McDowell Mountains, and I remembered that I had people in my life who loved me without calculating what I was worth. In September, I started going to a financial abuse support group that meets at a church in Gilbert. There are 12 of us. We're mostly older, mostly people who trusted the wrong person at the wrong time. A man named Roderick, retired high school principal, sharp as a tack, told me in our second meeting that he'd felt ashamed for a long time after his stepson drained his savings account. He said the shame was the hardest part, worse than the money. I understood what he meant. Because for a while I did feel ashamed. I felt like I should have seen it coming, like a man who spent his career designing systems to manage risk should have known better than to hand over a $310,000 property without any legal protections. But here's what I've come to understand. Love is not a design flaw. The fact that I wanted to take care of my son is not evidence that I was foolish. It's evidence that I was a father. What happened after? The forged signature, the HELOC, the loan application. That's on Marcus. That's not something I did wrong. That's something that was done to me, and when I finally let myself believe that, something in me settled. The mesquite tree in the backyard is old enough now that it throws serious shade in the afternoon. Patricia used to sit under it in a folding chair when the grandkids were small. I've been doing that this fall, bringing a book out there after lunch, when the light softens and the desert stops feeling like it's trying to kill you. I've been thinking about what I would tell someone who's listening to this story and recognizing pieces of their own life in it. Maybe it's your daughter instead of your son. Maybe it's not a house. Maybe it's a joint account or a power of attorney or just a pattern of requests that started small and kept growing. Maybe you've been telling yourself you're imagining it. You're probably not imagining it. The most important thing I did, the thing I wish I'd done the moment Marcus slid that folder across the steakhouse table, was talk to an attorney, not a family member, not a trusted friend, though those matter too, an actual attorney who specializes in elder law, who can look at your situation without emotion and tell you what your options are. The second most important thing was writing everything down. Every conversation, every unusual request, dates, amounts, what was said and what wasn't. That notebook wasn't just therapeutic. It became evidence. The third thing, and this one cost me the most, was accepting that protecting myself did not mean I had failed as a parent. I carried that weight for a long time. I kept thinking, if I'd been better, if Patricia and I had done something different, maybe Marcus wouldn't have turned out to be someone who practices his father's signature in private. I don't think that anymore. I did the best I could. I loved him the best I knew how, and when he chose what he chose, I protected what I'd built. That's all any of us can do. I still drive past the Tempe townhouse sometimes when I'm in that part of the valley. It's a nice place. Good bones, decent light in the afternoons. I picked it out carefully. I don't feel bitter when I drive past it. Or maybe I do a little and I'm still working on that. But mostly what I feel is clear. Like I know exactly where I stand and what I own and what I'm willing to protect. After 68 years, that's not nothing. Patricia used to say that the most important structures are the ones you can't see, the ones underground, holding everything else up. She was talking about our marriage, I think, about what we'd built together over 40 years. She was right, the way she usually was. I've been rebuilding those structures quietly, one decision at a time, and when I'm done, they'll hold. I've thought a lot about the word consequence, not in any grand or philosophical sense, just the plain, mechanical sense. The way an engineer thinks about it. Every load bears down on a structure. Every structure either holds or it doesn't. What Marcus did didn't happen in a vacuum. It happened at the end of a long chain of smaller choices. The first time he asked for something without saying thank you. The first time he framed my independence as a problem to be managed. The first time he looked at his father and saw an asset instead of a person. Those weren't accidents. They were decisions. And decisions made consistently over time become character. I don't say that to be cruel. I say it because I think it's the only honest way to understand what happened between us. Marcus didn't wake up one morning and decide to forge my signature. He arrived there gradually, one small compromise at a time, each one making the next a little easier to justify. That's how it usually works. Not a single catastrophic failure, but a slow erosion, quiet enough that you almost miss it while it's happening. What I had to learn, and it took me longer than I'd like to admit, was that my response to what he did was also a choice. I could have confronted him the night I found that envelope. I could have called him screaming and given him the chance to deny everything, to reframe it, to make me feel like the unreasonable one. I've seen that play out for other people in my support group. It almost never ends well. Instead, I did what I'd spent a career doing. I assessed the situation, I documented what I knew, and I made a plan before I made a move. That discipline, that willingness to act from clarity instead of from pain, is the only reason I still have my house, my savings, and my peace of mind. There's something I want to say to anyone who recognizes themselves in this story, because I know you're out there. I know some of you are sitting with a folder you didn't sign, or a request that didn't feel quite right, or a relationship that has slowly shifted from love into calculation. The hardest part isn't the legal steps. The hardest part is letting yourself believe that protecting yourself is not a betrayal of the people you love. I carried that weight for months. I kept thinking that a better father, a wiser man, would have found a way to fix this without the police report, without the attorney, without the trust and the changed beneficiaries. I kept thinking the damage was partly mine. It wasn't. Love is not a design flaw. Wanting to take care of your child is not evidence of weakness. What happened after, the forgery, the fraud, the careful practice of my signature, that belongs entirely to Marcus. I did not cause that. I could not have prevented it by loving him differently. Some people make choices that no amount of good parenting could have redirected, and the most honest and courageous thing you can do is see that clearly, even when it breaks your heart. The mesquite tree in my backyard is still standing. Brenda is coming for Thanksgiving this year. I've got tomatoes coming up along the back fence and a notebook full of dates and amounts that I hope I never need to open again. I rebuilt what needed rebuilding. Quietly, deliberately, one decision at a time. That's what strength looks like when it's real. Not loud, not dramatic, just steady.